Welcome back to the Total Confidence Podcast. I'm your host, Ahmad Wazir. I'm here with the author of Blessing My Demons, Miss Chelsea Forbrook. Chelsea is a spiritual director and certified Enneagram educator who has guided healing and spiritual transformation for everyone from individuals to corporate teams using a unique multidimensional lens that includes the Enneagram, 12-step programs, Buddhist teachings, and contemplative Christianity. She has introduced over 1,000 people to the inner work and healing possible when we become better acquainted with who we are, and that includes our shadow self. Welcome to Total Confidence Podcast, Chelsea.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here.
Glad to get to reconnect with you. And I usually do the formal introduction, what I just did, and then I do how we connected and everything. So I met you at the International Enneagram Conference in San Francisco, California. In last July, we were introduced by our mutual friend, Milton Stewart. And I just enjoyed just how welcome y'all made me feel. I got to spend some time with y'all, go to some workshops. And so it's just good to reconnect with you again.
Yeah, it is. It's really good to see you. That was a fun conference.
It was a whole lot of fun. I was on 10 like the whole time. So I'm still kind of floating off of that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So you are originally from Minnesota.
Yes, born and raised. Have lived a few other places here and there, but I'm back. This is home.
So tell us about Minnesota, like how has growing up there, describe what it was like and how that has shaped who you have become.
Yeah. Well, positives and negatives, right? To every place. So I would say the positives of what is still with me and why I still live here is Minnesota is beautiful. There's so much, even I live right in South Minneapolis, and there are 6 lakes right in the city. And, people go kayaking and canoeing, just like off work before dinner. And the people are active and love nature, advocate for, preserving, conserving nature. Like, it's strange. Like, even, people who politically you think wouldn't do, because people here are just really connected to the outdoors and wild spaces. And so that's been a big part of kind of my growing up. Has been a lot of camping, a lot of time in the woods, and just really feeling at home there, and connecting spiritually with nature. Kind of on the more challenging side is we have this, you could almost call it a slogan that people in Minnesota kind of brag about, which is Minnesota nice. And people here are really nice, like very friendly, say hello to everybody who walks past on the sidewalk, but it tends to be surface level and kind of related to emotional repression and conflict avoidance and people pleasing. Like, it's a lot of I would say, like, the cultural overlay of Minnesota is type 9, kind of the average levels of just like, we're very friendly, but also passive aggressive.
Yeah.
So, that's the way I was raised, and that's the way everyone around me was. And so kind of internalized a lot of those patterns. And so it for me, it kind of took like a good deal of suffering to start shaking me out of that and start thinking, oh my gosh, I have to do something different. Like, there's got to be another way to live life. So yeah, kind of grateful now looking back for, certain things that ended up being really challenging and then got me on a more authentic spiritual path.
Yeah, I first heard that term, Minnesota Nice, in your book, and I was going to ask you about that. So I'm glad you went there. How did you come to find the Enneagram
Mm-hmm.
travels? Like, tell me what was that like, and what was your first impression of the Enneagram?
So I am trained as a spiritual director, and I first heard about it in my spiritual direction training, but they didn't get into it very deep. It was like a quick thing alongside the Myers-Briggs, alongside the
Mhm.
Strength Finders. But I got kind of curious about it. But then my spiritual director that I was meeting with got a bunch of us together and helped us find our types. And so she had us watch panels. I think maybe they were from David Daniels.
Mhm.
I don't remember. This was a while ago, but they were facilitated panels of each type. And the very first one I watched was type 1. And I just was like both sobbing, but it was like a rage cry. It
Mhm.
was like I was so mad.
Mhm.
Um and of like, of course, like that's the the personality's response is like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of other feelings going on below that, probably like shock and embarrassment and grief, but what's expressing is rage, like pissed off
Mhm.
that it felt like, oh no, this is definitely me, and this is the worst
Mhm.
type. This is the worst type. I feel like God smote me with this personality. And how could God hate me this much?
So you started judging immediately.
Immediately. And then launched off into, okay, well, if this is true, I got to use this thing to fix myself, right? So then it became a using the Enneagram as like a self-improvement project, and like stressful in a way. I mean, a necessary first stage perhaps, but learning everything about it so that I could be better, be better, be better, perfect myself.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't have used these words at the time, but looking back, it's like, okay, when I read the description of a healthy one, it's like, I want to be that. That's perfection. That's where we're going.
Mhm.
Um, and so then all the striving, and when it's not happening, then judging myself and all the inner critic stuff getting super loud. But actually, that's how I knew I wasn't one, because the people on that panel were really focusing on the effects of their inner critic. And it was like, oh, that's what's happening. And I was completely attached to it, identified with it, thought it was me. Um, and wouldn't have called myself an angry person until I learned about the Enneagram. And then, but
Mhm.
everybody else around me knew I had a lot of rage. But
Mhm.
in my mind, I was just passionate. I was just right. And I was here to let other people know, educate them.
Mhm.
But like, for example, in my 20s, I worked at this nonprofit, and one of my coworkers went to Japan and came back, and we were good friends. And he bought everyone on the staff a gift from Japan. And my gift, I should have brought it over here to show you, but it's this beautiful hand painted mug of a very angry sumo wrestler.
Wow, wow, wow.
And he said, Chelsea, this is for you to just slowly sip a cup of tea
Ooh.
while you're feeling angry. And
Wow.
at the time, I was like, Dave, what the heck? Like, I'm not angry. What do you think you are? Need an angry mug? Um, but now I look at that thing and I'm like, wow, that was such a beautiful gift. And
Wow.
now I can use that. And everybody could see it but me. Everybody could see it but me.
Was the Minnesota Nice thing on top of, I guess, the type one ego structure of being angry is bad? It seems like it might be a double dose of making you repress that on both of those things.
Yes, exactly. So there is so much emphasis on being appropriate, not making other people uncomfortable, not expressing big emotions, difficult emotions. Unless it was happiness, then that's okay to express. But anything else was not okay. And I even, got that very direct message over and over and over again as a kid. Like whenever I would have a big emotion, my dad in particular would say, "Be nice, shh, be nice."
Yeah.
And it, now, I mean, it's like, I know he was just trying his best and like thought that was the right way to parent. And it's like, oh, that was painful to be told that my whole self was not welcome to be expressed.
We're going to get into the book, which I was really surprised, the direction you took in the book, pleasantly surprised. It's funny, it's spiritual, it's raw, you displayed your personality so uniquely and just brilliantly. So I really enjoyed the book.
Thank you.
I want to tell you that. But before we get into the book, I just want to ask you a question. It's about the type 1 reaction formation. Does that resonate with you, the description of the reaction formation, and what does that look like?
Yeah, that took me a long time to figure out. And I think I'm maybe even just within like the last year, finally understanding it and seeing it play out, and sometimes catching myself in the act, but it happens so quickly. So that term was so hard for me to wrap my mind around, but if I change the phrase to forming a reaction, that makes more sense to me because it's forming an appropriate reaction.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, when you're upset with somebody, to say, "Oh, it's okay, no big deal, we're all good." That's reaction formation. And I catch myself doing that all the time and then feeling resentful because it's like, wait, I have stuff that I want to share and I missed my opportunity, should have said it in the moment. But it also comes up with like things about avoiding rest because like rest or relaxation or fun, even pleasure, all of these things get put in the like self-indulgent, selfish category according to the personality. And the world is burning, so why would I take a nap?
Right.
And so that there's all this guilt around rest, relaxation, play, pleasure. And so that gets kind of shoved down as well. And it's like, you got to earn it. When all the things are checked off the list, then you can, do something fun or take a nap. But all of that is, getting pushed down, formed into an appropriate reaction there, which according to the personality, the appropriate reaction is to be constantly on the go, constantly doing good that is observable and working towards the mission, whatever the mission is.
Is there a physical sensation you feel when you're forming that reaction?
Yeah, it's the breath gets shallower. Sometimes I'll be even holding my breath. And tightness, like the jaw, the chest, the neck and shoulders, even like the diaphragm, pelvic floor, like all these kind of different layers of just like clenching that are holding the anger or the, whatever the desire or the the impulse is, holding it down.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that. I really was just interested about that. So let's talk about your book.
Yeah.
What inspired you to write Blessing My Demons, first of all?
Yeah. So the subtitle of the book is how to name, tame, and transform your inner critic. And so it's it's a workbook. It's a memoir, but it's a teaching memoir. And so it has personal stories, but then also spiritual teachings and exercises for the reader to go through. And I, a while back, had started with the advice of a couple of my different Enneagram teachers, had started thinking of my inner critic as a character separate from myself. And so I had, I think, two characters that I would kind of dialogue with, kind of laugh about. It was like this Darth Vader character.
Yeah.
And this just like really cynical nun who and I call her Sister Mary Chastity Constance of the Immaculate Righteousness.
Yeah.
And so both of those I had identified long before I had an idea to write a book. But I had that method that was really helping me. Like when I would be feeling crushed by, the fear of making a mistake, to realize, oh, this is just Darth Vader breathing down my neck.
Yeah.
Okay. And then turn around and face him and like dialogue and see what he wants. How is he trying to protect me? Like, what does he need? Get his needs met, which are, coincidentally my needs. And same thing with the nun. Like the nun was like kind of when I slide into that stressful 4 place of having a pity party, blah, 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 just feeling my feelings. Everything's wrong with the world. And so to be able to be gentle with her too, I was learning to be gentle with myself. And so the story of kind of how the idea for the book happened was really cool, because I was at a spiritual direction conference, and in the middle of the night, I woke up and I was like having an inner critic attack. Is what I call it. So some people have panic attacks, but this was an inner critic attack where it was so intense it woke me up, and I could not get it to calm down. And I was using all my meditation tricks and breathing, and nothing was working. And so I went out into the hallway and brought my journal and started just writing down everything that the voice was saying. And as I was writing it out, then I kind of read through it and was like, who is this? This isn't me. I know it's not me by this point.
Yeah.
And read through it and realized, oh, this thing is a street preacher. It's ranting and raving about how everyone's doing their life wrong, and they're just bad people, and they better repent and turn their lives around, but no consideration for looking at myself, just lecturing and having those imaginary conversations in my head of kind of telling people off. And so once I was like, oh, it's a street preacher, my body just relaxed. It all quieted down. It went away. And there was something about seeing who it was, or kind of the flavor of what it was about, seeing it's not me, that was amazing. And so then from that, just instantly kind of poured out from me the outline to this book in the middle of the night in the hallway of this hotel. And so the next morning I sat down next to my friend, Sean Murphy, who is a Zen priest. And I told him, Sean, I just had this kind of like download for a book. And he pulled out of his briefcase this flyer. He's like, well, just in case you want some mentoring and guidance around writing your first book, I teach a course for first-time authors that starts in May, which was like 2 months later.
Yeah.
And so I signed up. I went through it with this cohort of people that were all writing their first book, had the accountability, had the mentorship, was given all these amazing tools, and got got through the first draft of my book in 9 months because of them. So I highly recommend, shout out to Sean and Tanya, who have this course called Write to the Finish. If anyone out there is trying to write a book and you don't know where to start, just sign up for their course. You'll have your first draft in 9 months.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I want to keep it personal with you, because you shared so much in that book. What was it like to know once you published it and put it out there, and the things that you've shared so personal? Um, Tell me what was going through your mind once it like got out there. Was there fear? Was there excitement? What was it like for you?
Yeah, great question. So the fear, there was a lot of fear, a lot of questions about how is this going to land with people? Is this going to offend people? Am I going to lose clients because of this? Am I going to lose friends because of this? Are my parents going to read this? Are they going to disown me? And, and so, because yeah, there's a lot of very personal stuff, stories in the book. And so all those questions kind of came before it was published. And it was actually the thing holding me back from moving into the publishing phase. And I was kind of feeling overwhelmed by that. And then the pandemic hit, and it was just like, okay, I can't deal with this. So the book just sat on my computer for a couple of years. Didn't look at it at all. And so then after a few years, then, some inner critic stuff started creeping in around, well, who's going to want to read this anyway? Is this even relevant? Like, after this pandemic happened and George Floyd and just so many things, like, what does this matter? And I started meeting with this amazing Enneagram coach named Anne Murray, and she read my book and she was like, this has to get out into the world. I'm going to coach you until it's published.
Wow.
For sure. Like, and probably beyond. And she, so she offered me a bunch of free sessions actually. And so she kind of boosted my confidence again to get over that hump of the fears, of the self-doubt. But it was interesting once the book was actually launched out into the world. The fear just kind of completely went away. It was like, okay, well, I said all these things about myself. Like, I basically called myself out on, all of my shadows, or, my just neurotic, judgy, even hateful parts of my personality. Laid it all out. And so it's like, well, I said these things about myself. So now it doesn't matter if someone else says it because I said it first.
Right.
And so I kind of felt like this freedom really in that some of the pieces, some of the stories in that book, I think there was still maybe a little bit of shame hanging on to some of them. But once that book was out in the world, it was so healing. It was like, that was the end of it. I just released the shame around some of that stuff.
I see a lot of 4 and 7 energy you leaned into with I love the pictures, and I love how you describe. You make me want to go and watch Star Wars because I only saw the first 3, so I got to see Anakin and all that. So first of all, you made me want to go and sit down and watch those, and the characters. I just think it's alchemy, like that you've taken this loud inner critic and just kind of channeled it into something that's of value. So, what has been some of the most touching feedback you have received from the book? Is anything jump out at you as far as people's reactions to it?
Yeah. Well, There's been a lot of feedback, and people are sending me pictures of their drawings of their inner critics and stories about, what their inner critic is saying, and just seeing a lot of people shift from a stuck place into being able to bring humor into the situation, which loosens everything up.
Yeah.
And so that's been really cool. And this is kind of a personal one, but it was sort of surprising in a really neat way that there was one person who read it who shared that it has kind of healed their sex life because they had brought their inner critic of this like judgmental God into their sex life, and working with the book and the exercises and creating their own inner critics around that particular issue has healed a lot. And this is a person who's been married for 30 years, and suddenly that connection within their marriage is like much more free and joyful. So that made me so happy to hear that feedback. And yeah, because the inner critic stuff, it does permeate every area of our life, whether it's personal relationships, friendships, work, starting a new hobby, getting back into the dating world, parenting, like it's everywhere. So I really do think, I truly believe this book is for everyone, because everyone has an inner critic, and it gets so heavily talked about and emphasized in the Enneagram world as Enneagram ones have the inner critic.
Yeah. But
it's every single personality, and it's that inner critic that's demanding something different of each personality. And I think that often gets glossed over or completely forgotten in a lot of teachings. And it is the thing that keeps us from changing and evolving. So it's so important. It's so important for everybody to dig into this in their inner work.
Let's talk about the inner critic, which is the core of the book. Just for context, we'll just break it down. Like, okay, when we're talking about inner critic, what exactly is this inner critic that we're referring to, and how does it, you kind of gave a little bit of it just now, just how, but how did you experience it prior to giving this form and expression in this way?
Yeah. So the function of the inner critic for every single personality type is to keep us the same. It's to keep us from doing anything new outside of the box of our personality. So if you think of your personality type as a box that you've got some room to move in there and a few choices, but there's this whole world out there, at least 8 other ways of being in the world that we don't have access to. And so anytime we try to step out of that box and do something different, like for a 4 to step out might look like feeling content, feeling like there's nothing missing in my life, right? That I can be happy. Even me, I can be happy. And that's outside of the box for a 4. So that's the moment when the 4's inner critic is going to come in and squash them back down and give them some kind of warning or danger or lecture or just rant against them that's going to push them back into the box of longing and melancholy. Whereas like for a 7, their inner critic is going to be really different. Like it might even sound like a happy pep talk because it's like, it's going to be demanding of them that you stay happy, you stay upbeat, you stay moving forward, you're on the move. You're the Energizer buddy for everybody else, not just yourself. And so come on, you can do it. Like that's actually an inner critic for a 7, because it's keeping them trapped in their box. And so that's the function of it. And it's like just these demands that it puts on us that it just wants us to stay the same. And because it's scared. It's scared.
I've never heard it described like that. That's brilliant. It makes sense. As a person who leads with type 5 energy, and just kind of being afraid of connection and everything that resonates with me a lot.
Yeah.
You talked about, you opened the book up and you're talking about a great awakening that you see taking place
Mm.
among human beings. Can you describe what you see as far as in this time and what that looks like?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I am a type 1, so just a disclaimer that I'm an idealist. And so I think, I am constantly seeing the tension between what could be and then how we're falling short. And that being said, I think I'm feeling that people everywhere of all ages are really not across the board, not everyone, but pockets of people everywhere around the world, all generations are waking up, are noticing that there's more to life, and wanting to know themselves, wanting to contribute, wanting to be conscious. And there are so many ways that is happening. And I really believe, the Enneagram has been largely contributing to that, but it's not the only way. It's not the only map that wakes people up.
Yeah.
There's, as Rumi said, there's 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. And so
Wow.
we can choose many paths, but it's happening. And with the kind of globalization of information and spiritual traditions communicating with each other and the kind of this interspiritual connection that's happening, it's people are finding spirituality in new ways within their own traditions, going deeper, kind of back to the roots, or discovering through, travel or reading or the internet, ways to meditate, new ways to pray, new ways to connect with people, to open our hearts, right? To notice what's going on in our minds. And I feel it happening and feel hopeful about it.
I can see that. I know you say you're a 1 and you're an idealist, but I can kind of see that as well. And the Enneagram is definitely a great sign of that. Different people from all over the world connecting, like you said. You talked about, this is something that really jumped out at me with the book, codependency. And you talked about like dating an alcoholic. And what really stood out to me was entering the 12-step program because of the effects of that relationship on you. We hear people talk about entering the 12-step because they're direct abuse of alcohol or drugs, but I don't often hear people talk about the effect of trying to take care and help that person. What was that like going into that 12-step, and what was your greatest takeaway from that time in that program?
Wow. Yeah. So many takeaways. The very first meeting I went to, one of my friends basically dragged me there. And she had known about it and had been to some meetings and it had helped her. And so, yeah, she had been kind of, one of my best friends, and like watching me just go through this torture of trying to save this person, trying to fix this person, trying to get this person resources, my partner, who I love dearly, and he was a wonderful human, and like very in denial about his addiction and not choosing recovery. And so I was trying to do it for him.
Yeah.
And which just doesn't work, by the way. The person has to have their own kind of awakening around that. and it happens on their own time. But so many people, you know, addiction affects everyone around them, and it becomes a whole family system. And the other people in the family who are not addicts, you know, whether it's the biological family or, you know, spouses, whatever, play into it, you know, cover things up, enable, try to help, which like then takes power away from the person who could be helping themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and it's exhausting and it's depleting, because what eventually happens for the family and friends of addicts or people with extreme mental illness, similar, is we get really depleted. We completely neglect our own needs.
Yeah.
Don't even know we have needs. The focus is all on the other person. And so I would say some of my main takeaways would be the phrase they use in the 12-step groups that I was in was like, stay on your side of the street and clean up your side of the street.
Mm.
Get the attention off of your neighbor's house, right?
Okay.
Trying to fix up their yard, their garden, their paint. Like, that's their job. Work on your own house, because there's plenty going on right over here on my side of the street. Plenty to work on for a lifetime. So start there, and that benefits everyone around you anyway. So just focus on that.
Yeah. One thing I also jumped out at the book, jumped out from the book, was the fact that it's not dogmatic and you have some biblical references. And what I thought was really interesting was that the story that resonated the most with you in the Bible was the story of Legion, from the book of Mark. Why did you feel connected to all of the things in the Bible that really like hit the heart right there? Like, what was it about that biblical story that resonated with you?
Yeah. So Legion, for people who may not know, is this man who is possessed by maybe hundreds of demons, supposedly.
Mhm.
And he's like, the people in the town are so scared of him, they've like brought him out to the cemetery and they've like chained him to the tombstones to try to contain him.
Yeah, yeah,
And he's like constantly breaking the chains and running around hurting himself, cutting himself.
yeah,
And then Jesus comes along, sees him, sees past the demons to who this man actually is,
mm,
and, you know, heals him, moves the demons out, and gives the demons a choice. He doesn't just kill the demons or vanquish them. He's
yeah,
like, hey, demons, where do you want to go? And they're like, we want to go into the pigs. And he's like, okay,
yeah,
have at it.
yeah.
So he's even kind to the demons,
Wow,
which I find amazing.
wow.
And gives them a choice and like dialogues with them instead of just like, F you, get out of here, you know? Which is usually the way we try to treat our inner critic, is like,
Wow.
F you, get out of here, I'm in charge of my life, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, we argue with it or whatever. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah, that Legion character, I just feel like so much empathy for, like, I mean, because I mean, to be clear, like, I've never like physically cut myself or like, you know, had those type of struggles, but internally feeling like, yeah, there's so many competing voices and which one is me, and like wrestling with, yeah, just rage and, you know, hate and fear and judgment and shame, and like, if naming all those things as demons, right, and not knowing how to get rid of them, and hurting myself. That's the like cutting part, is like, it's hurting the people around me,
yeah.
so that they don't, like, they're kind of scared of me. And I've had in my past many people who have said, when I first met you, you were so intimidating, I was terrified of you.
Mm,
And, you know, like in my 20s when I was really in it.
yeah,
And yeah, and it's like, so it's hurting the people around me, it's scaring the people around me, but it's also hurting myself because it's isolating me from true connection with people. if the judgment is always making myself better than or worse than, there's no space then to connect and be part of community. Just like this man who's chained outside of the town in the graveyard, like wishing he were dead, like go to the graveyard, that's where you belong.
Yeah.
The loneliness that comes from that. And then, yeah, just the reading it with the possibility of like, oh, you could dialogue with the demons. You could ask them what they want. Huh, okay, let's try that. And then that shifts everything.
Yeah, it's definitely as opposed to going against it, because shame comes with that, as opposed to, like you said, just having a dialogue. And I just think it's brilliant. And so as we come to a close, I do want to talk about some of the characters. You mentioned um it's Darth Vader, but you gave him a different name.
Yes, he's called Harsh Grader in the book.
Arch Greater, and then Miss Prissy was my favorite one, by the way, the drama and everything, because she was just saying everything that was let's talk about these characters just briefly. Just
Yeah.
first of all, I love the drawing. I mean, I just, again, I love the fact that you just put your personality into the book. Because I wasn't expecting that. I was like, okay, another Enneagram book, and then I was reading this, I was like, wait a minute, whoa, okay, this is different. So, what is your favorite character? And
Oh
you mentioned
gosh.
a letter, but what is your favorite character, and what do you like the most about that character?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. It's hard. It's really hard to pick one because at this point, honestly, I kind of feel like they're all friends and they're like my friends. And I really have kind of befriended them and hold them very dear. Because they're just so misguided and like neurotic and like what? Come on. They're clearly suffering and like need love. But I love so in I have one chapter that talks a lot about Star Wars because I'm a nerd like that. And so I had the Harsh Grader character, but then there's also this Yoda character
Yeah,
who instead of calling him Yoda, I called him Master High Bar
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
Yoda's teachings are they're in a way they're sort of like pseudo Buddhist and like there's some
yeah,
good nuggets in there,
yeah,
but then it's also kind of dualistic in some places. And like, this famous Yoda quote is like, do or do not, there is no try.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so like I had kind of internalized that as a child, like, okay, if you're gonna do something, you do it right and you do it perfectly or not at all. And so that little Yoda character had really gotten into my psyche about procrastinating things if they can't be perfect. And so the quote of the picture in the book, he's saying, do or do not, trying is for losers.
Yeah.
So I really like him. I think he's funny and grumpy. Yeah, I don't know who else.
I like the nun. I know you talked about the nun earlier, but just the whole picture of the nun was just like,
The nun, she might be one of my favorites, Sister Mary Chastity, Constance of the Immaculate Righteousness, because her name suggests like, perfection and holiness, and like
yeah,
you think she'd be kind and demure, but then she's actually this nun like sitting with her legs spread, drinking a beer, smoking a cigarette behind the nunnery, and like complaining about life and using super foul language. Like it's very, very crass. So, maybe don't have anyone under age, I don't know, 14 read the book.
well, they got the phones now, internet, so yeah, I think they'll be okay from the stuff that they experience. So
Yeah, yeah. But she's a rock it. Because she's just like talking shit about God. She's like, she is insulting everybody. She's just bitter, like bitter and resentful that she's been doing all this holy work and everyone else gets to have fun. And so, yeah, it's she's goofy.
Yeah.
She needs a break. She needs a vacation. She needs to get out of the convent. Go let her hair down somewhere.
Exactly. A brilliant book. I think it's a must read. And again, it's real. I know people use that word, it's real, but what I mean by that is it has heart. It has, you capture your personality, you put yourself into it, and that's the main thing that connects. I mean, we can all go into theory. I'm a type 5. Trust me, I can, as Dr. Chestnut said, I can dwell in abstraction all day long, but to just kind of show up. And so I really appreciate what you're doing with the book. I'm sure it's like people are saying, it's freeing them because it's not dogma. You put yourself out there. So keep it up.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And for those who want to know more about the book is available on Amazon and your website,
Yes.
which is
chelseaforbrook.com. And if you don't like buying from Amazon, you can go to itascabooks.com and order it there as well. That's the distributor. Itasca, Itasca, Itasca Books.
well, thank you so much. Glad we finally got to do
Yes.
this. We had a little difficulty connecting, but the timing is perfect. So
Yes.
thank you so much for coming on.
This was fun.
We got to do this again.
For sure.
This is the Total Confidence Podcast. This is Ahmad Wazir with Chelsea Forbrook. The book is called Blessing My Demons. Must read. Great book. We thank y'all for listening. We'll catch you soon.